Hi there and welcome to the labs. In this video I'm going to show you how easy it is to create this stacking coaster set in the software. Now the project consists of 4 coasters, each with some V-carve text that reads either tea or coffee. It has a base with steel pins that holds everything together. Don't have VectricSoftware? Don't worry, we've made this one compatible with the free trial. So let's just jump straight into the software and we'll show you how to create the design and the toolpaths to cut your next free project. So we're using V-carve Pro in this example, however this project is applicable to V-carve Desktop and Aspire. So to begin, we're going to start by creating a new file. And then that will open up the job setup form. And this is where we need to set up our job space for us to then go ahead and create the design. So generally you just want to base this based on the approximate size of the design you want, or perhaps you've got a piece of material and you're just going to work from those dimensions. So in our case, we're working with a single-sided job, and we're using that because we're only going to machine on one side of our material. In terms of the job size, I'm just going to base that roughly based around the material that I plan to use. So we'll go with a width here of 21.25, and then the height of that is 5.7. So I've got a piece of walnut and the height of that is 5.7, and the length is just over kind of 30 inches, but I'm just going to limit this to 21 just to fit my design in. So then we go with a material thickness. So here we're going to go with 0.22. So I've measured that material thickness already, and so you're going to want to alter this according to the material thickness that you are using. We'll set the Z0 position to be on the material surface. So that's where we set the tool 0 position. And then we need to set our XY datum position. Now I'm going to set that to the lower left hand corner so that all of the positions in our job space are all going to be positive values, where this point here is 0, 0. So 0 the Y axis, and then 0, and then this is the X axis here. Okay, so once you're happy with that, we could just go ahead and press OK. Okay, so now that we have our square, it's time to add in some text to decorate it. So to do that, we'll go into the Draw Text tool over here. And you can see that in the 2D view, we actually have a box here that indicates how big and where our text is going to be positioned. And so we can move that wherever we like. So I'd like to position that somewhere roughly around here at the bottom. I like the actual height that we've got there for our text. And so now it's a case of choosing our font and then typing in our text. So here, if we go into the actual create text form, we've got an area where we can type in text. So for example, we can type in the word coffee here, like so. And you can see that actually looks quite alright. I actually quite like that font. But if you wanted to change the font, you can just use the drop down menu here, and then the fonts will be pulled from all the fonts that you currently have installed on your machine. So in this case, we're just going to go back to that font that we've got there. That's the one I like. Very happy with that. Press close, and there we have our text. Okay, so let's just zoom in on the design there. So I'm just going to select the word coffee, and we're just going to nudge it over slightly to the left. Now what I'd like to do is just add in a line that would ultimately look at V-carving. We're going to V-carve into this text, and V-carving is where we're able to use a V-bit tool to cut in between the vectors of our text. So we're going to look at drawing in a rectangle. Okay, so we're going to use the rectangle tool, and this time I'm actually going to just manually draw it without entering specific dimensions here. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to snap to the bottom of the letter E here, and we're going to snap to the top there. And the reason for that is I just want to create a rectangle that has the same thickness as our text that we've got there. So we can close out, and you can see that it's created that. That looks good, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to have that overstretching past that coaster. So I'm just going to take it, I'm just going to grab onto this handle in the middle there. I'm just going to stretch that out. So ultimately we're going to look at V-carving in between this shape here, and the reason for overstretching it past the edge of our coaster is just to ensure that we get a nice crisp line that runs all the way through. If we was to perhaps leave that over here, we'd have corners present here, so we just want to overstretch that so we get a nice clean cut through there. Okay, so that's pretty much the coffee side of things. So now what I'd like to do is I'd like to add the word T that's kind of mirrored to the top portion of the coaster. So to do that, I'm just going to help myself by drawing in a line that splits the square that we've got in two. Okay, so I'm going to draw that line and attach that there, and we're just going to right click to come out. So it's just a line that basically goes from the midpoint of the coaster from the left to the right, and that's going to help us to basically mirror this text. So we're going to take this text, we're also going to hold down shift, and we're going to then hold down shift and select this line, and then over into the mirror tool, what we can do is we can say create a mirrored copy where we want to flip that about the line. So you can see it looks like that there. Okay, so that's all well and good. However, I want to flip that now horizontally so that coffee reads correctly. So we're just going to undraw this option here to create a mirrored copy, and we're just going to use this option here to flip horizontal. We can see what that looks like there. Okay, so just going to zoom in there and just nudge that over to the left like so. So we're creating that space there, because what we did then, we just essentially flipped it and then we flipped it again. So we just need to create those little nudges just to put it in place. Okay, so now we've got coffee and coffee, but we want to change the text from coffee to tea, and that can easily be done by selecting the text, going into the text tool, and then we'll just go in here and we'll type in the word tea instead, and then we're just going to take that rectangle, ensuring that we go past the actual coaster, and we're just going to stretch that across up to the letter A there. Perhaps we'll just do that a little bit more, just so it's a little bit closer there, like so. And we'll press F to fit that to our screen. With this vector, we can now select it and delete it. We don't need that there, and that's pretty much our coaster done. Okay, so now what we can do is we can take our coaster and we can look at creating copies of that. So we're going to use this option here to create an array of copies. And here we can specify the row and the columns. So we're going to go with one row, we want 4 columns here, and we can specify a gap between each of those. So let's just go 3/8 of an inch, and then we'll go ahead and press copy like so. And that's pretty much that. But actually what I want to do is I want to actually create a 5th one to create our base. So let's just undo that, and then we'll go in here and we'll just add in 5 like so, press copy, there we go. Close out, so we've got all of our coasters. And what we need to do now is just need to make some tweaks to the 5th coaster, because that's going to be our base. So we're actually going to select that text and we're going to delete it. Because we want the base bigger than our coaster, I'm just going to nudge that over, and we're going to look at offsetting this vector. So to do that, we're going to go into the offset tool, we're going to offset that one outwards, and we're going to offset that by 0.4 of an inch. Okay, so we're going to keep a copy of the original, so just go ahead and press offset, and we can see that there. So then we could go ahead and close. So this is what our coasters would look like sat on top of the base if we was to look at this from a bird's eye point of view. So what we need to do now is we need to look at positioning the circles that are going to represent our pins, and it's these pins that are going to hold our coasters all together in that base. Okay, so in terms of the actual pin itself, so I've measured the diameter, and the diameter of the pin is 0.236. So we need to draw a circle that's 0.236. So over here, we're just going to go into there, put the diameter 0.236 like so, go ahead and press create, and you can see it's created that, and then all we need to do then is just move that. So I'm going to move that so it snaps exactly at the halfway point of the top portion of our coaster. And then what I'd like to do is I'd actually like to move it up the y-axis by a very small amount, and that's just to ensure that we give a little bit of wiggle room for our coasters to sit inside of those pins. So with that circle selected, we're going to go into the Move Selected Objects tool. We're going to move up the y-axis by a very small 0.0075. So it's a very small amount, but that should help enable us to actually slot those coasters in nicely without it being too tight and nor it being too loose. Okay, so you can see it's just moved up just a nudge there. So now I need to create circles that are going to go either side of the square as well. So with that vector selected, we're actually going to use the circle array tool. Okay, now in here, if I select the original circle and if I click it again, you'll see I've got this target, and this target is the pivot point. So I can snap to the center point of any object, which you can see the software is kindly telling me that's the center of this square, and we can create an array of copies based around this center point. So we're going to go 4 copies in a 360-degree angle. Copy that, and you can see it's created it, and you'll see we have the space in here, and that's just based on how we set up the original vector. Okay, so we pretty much have everything ready to go and create our toolpaths. So let's switch over to the Toolpaths tab. So to do that, we're going to use this icon here. It's going to close the Drawing tab and open up the Toolpaths tab on the right. This is where we now take our vectors and we assign toolpaths to them. So the first and most important thing that we need to do is check over our material setup at the top here. So here, the material thickness is 0.22. We're setting our XY datum position in the lower left. The Z0 position for our tooling on our material is going to be on the material surface. And then you want to check over your rapid Z gaps above the material home and start position are all safe and appropriate for your particular machine, the material you're using and your setup. So it's important that you've checked everything is correct here, and it's going to be set up exactly as you've got it set here physically on your CNC machine with your material. Okay, so once we're happy with that, we could go ahead and press OK. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to look at creating a V-carve toolpath. So just going to select all of the vectors that we need for the V-carve toolpath. So just going to deselect those outlines using the Shift key there, and you can see we've just got the text and the lines highlighted. So with that selected, we're going to go into this toolpath here, the V-carve toolpath, and this enables us to use a V-bit tool, and it will create a cut based on the angle of the tool where it can fit in between the actual vectors themselves. In this case, we're going to set the start depth at 0, so it's going to be on the material surface. And then in terms of the tool that we're going to use, if we use the select option, that'll open up the tool database, and this is where you store your library of tools. You can alter the parameters, fees and speeds and that sort of thing in here. Just going to go through this fairly quickly. We're just going to pick up an Armana RC1148 tool. So this is a 60-degree 1/4 inch V-bit there, and then we're just going to go ahead and press select. And then simply at the bottom, we're just going to give that a name. We'll call that V-carve, and we could go ahead and press calculate. And the software will calculate that for us. It will open up the toolpath preview, which is perfect as it enables you to see exactly the travel of where the tool's going to go, where it's going to cut first, the order of the cut and that sort of thing. And handy over here, we have the option to actually preview that toolpath and simulate that in our virtual piece of material. And we can see that looks pretty good. So if it doesn't look good at this stage, you need to make your edits until you're happy with the preview, then go ahead and take that over to your CNC. It's kind of the beauty of the toolpath previews that we're able to get a good idea of what it looks like before we actually machine into our material. Okay, so we'll close out here. We're going to use this option to tile our windows horizontally. That way we can see both the 2D and the 3D view at the bottom there. So next up, we need to look at creating our pockets or recesses for our dowel pins to sit into. So that's using these circle vectors. Now, when you're working with parts that need to slot into other parts, it's always good to do a little test cut to ensure that the parts fit in before you actually cut into the real thing. So with those vectors selected, I'm just going to nudge them over to the right a little. And I'm actually just going to take one of these circles and I'm going to press Control to create a copy, and we're just going to create a copy and move that over here. I'm going to create another copy below. I'm just going to run some test cuts here. So this circle is actually representative of the diameter of the pin that I'm going to use. So we're going to go into the pocket toolpath. Okay, so here we need to specify the start depth, so that's going to be 0, top of the material, and the cut depth. So we don't want to cut all the way through, but we want to cut down just enough that the material can have enough depth to actually hold that pin in place. So we're going to go down to 0.15. You can use the select option to select a tool. The tool I'm using is actually already selected here. It's an 1/8 inch end mill there, so we're going to use that one. Okay, so if I just remove that, I've just added that into our list. I've already got that tool listed there, so just use the remove tool to remove that duplicate. And then we can move on down, and then we can just call this one pocket test, like so, calculate it, and then we'll just go and press close out of here. I'm actually going to select this vector here. I'm going to go back into the pocket toolpath, pretty much the exact same settings, except this time we're going to overcut that. So I'm going to put in a negative allowance here of negative 0.0025. So we're just going to cut slightly over the actual vector, just to give it a little bit of wiggle room, and this hopefully is going to enable us to actually have the room to actually put that pin in, but it's still tight enough that it's not too loose for it to wiggle around. So we'll go ahead and call that one pocket test 2, and then go ahead and calculate that. And so the idea is we're going to run these toolpaths on our CNC, so we're going to run both of the pockets, and then we're going to take our pin and we're going to check which setting actually fit best, and whatever fits best we're going to apply it to the actual pockets for our pins. So I'm going to take a good guess here, and I'm going to say that the one with the allowance is going to work best for us, as we're going to have allow for a little bit of wiggle room for our pin to actually slot in. But obviously in the real world you're going to want to do that test first, but I need to show you how we then create that toolpath afterwards once we're happy with that test. So then we'll take all of those vectors that we've got there into the pocket toolpath, and again the exact same settings with the allowance that actually worked within our test. And if neither of these work, we'll just continue to create more tests, just tweaking those values, making them bigger or smaller according to what works best when you actually fit that pin into that recess. Okay, so we'll call that one pocket pins, and then we'll go ahead and press calculate. That's assuming that that test worked, so you just want to change that value according to your test cut, and then we can close out. Well, actually let's just go and preview that. So we'll preview that, and that's the 4 holes there. Okay, so let's just close out. Finally, we just need to do a cutout pass, so we're going to take all of the outline vectors. Okay, so we've got those, and then shift and select this one as well. We're going to go into the profile toolpath. Okay, so we're going to cut all the way through our material, so Z equals, and the software will pull that number out. We're going to use that same tool that we used for the pocket. We're going to machine on the outside of those vectors. We're also going to look at adding in tabs. So tabs enable us to add a bridge between the actual part we're cutting out to the material we're cutting out of, and that just ensures that the parts don't fly out because there's nothing to hold them in place. And so we can specify a length and a thickness to our tab. So we'll go with an 1/8 inch length, thickness of 0.1. You can go to edit tabs where we can specify a constant number, so we could put 2 in there if we wanted to. You can move the tabs, you can delete them by clicking on them, and you can click anywhere on the vector to add a tab. Okay, so that's going to hold all of our parts in place to our material. Then we move on to some more advanced options that I think is worth knowing about. So add in ramp. So rather than us plunging directly or vertically into our material, we can add a ramp, and that just gives us more of a diagonal move. It just really helps with the wear and tear of the tool. Also want to look at adding in leads. So rather than plunging in right next to the start point of your actual part that you're cutting out, we can actually say to the software, we want it to start somewhere here, we want it to lead in, and this just helps avoid things like witness marks from where like the tool's been plunging in at that same spot. So we're going to add in a circular lead, and we're also going to ramp in on that lead. We can give that a name, and then we can simply just go ahead and press calculate, in which case we can then preview that. We can take a look at what that looks like, and you can see everything's held together nice and securely to our material. Looks pretty good. I'm happy with that. So at this stage it's just about us saving out those toolpaths. So to save out your toolpaths, you simply come over to the save toolpath option. And then it's simply a case of selecting all of your toolpaths, and then we can use the save toolpath option, and then use this option here to save out visible toolpaths to multiple files. And we can select your machine along with the post processor for your machine and simply save them out. So let's head over to the labs. Right then, so now that we've saved out our toolpaths, let's transfer them over to our CNC. And we'll get our material and load in the V-bit tool too. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is set our X0, Y0 position on our material. Okay, so now that we've set our X0, Y0 positions, we now need to set our Z0 position for our tool. And so we're actually going to use a touch plate to help us do that, where we're going to put the touch plate on the material surface. The tool's going to drop down, and once it makes contact with the touch plate, that'll send a signal to basically say, this is where I want to set my Z0 position. And we're going to do that again when we come to change our tool to the end mill as well. So now that we've done with our two test cuts, we're going to check how well this pin fits into those pockets. So for the first one, we actually had no allowance whatsoever. We actually created that circle base on the diameter of the pin that we're using. So really, we'd expect a very tight, snug fit there, which we do have that. I'm having to put in a lot of effort to try and push that in. The second one, however, we've got a little bit of an allowance, so we've applied a little bit of an overcut to that. And this one actually fits really nice. It goes in nice and easy. It's still tight. We're not forcing it in like we are with the first one. So we're going to go and just rearrange our file to make sure that the holes that we cut for the final coaster base, it has that allowance in so that we can easily slot those pins in. And so there we're done with the machining side of things. So we're going to take the material off of the spoil board. We're going to remove those tabs, and then we're just going to give it an all-round finish, so a little bit of sanding, and then we'll apply some kind of finish just to really bring that material out. Okay, so now all of our parts are detabbed and sanded. We're going to finish these with a little bit of beeswax. We're going to rub some beeswax into an old rag, and we're going to rub it into the coasters. And hopefully that's going to lift the grain just to make it a little bit more vibrant. Okay, so there we have it. So hopefully you've seen how easy it was to create this project, and it's one of those that you could easily personalise to with different words or phrases that could really make a unique last minute gift. And so here's one that we made earlier. So it's the same concept, except rather than using squares we're using circles. We've changed the text as well, and then we've painted around the outside just to give it a little bit of colour. So we'll pop this file in the project folder too. So to try this one out for yourself, head over to your V&CO account to download the free project files. Not a Vectric customer? No worries. You too can cut this one on your machine with our free trial. And you can find the link for the trial below this video. And if you do make your own version of this project, we'd love to see it. So don't forget to tag us in your posts or share them on the Vectric Forum. If you like this video, then give us a thumbs up, and if you've not yet subscribed to our channel, then hit that subscribe button for instant updates on the latest videos that we'll be releasing. So thank you for watching, and happy making!